YouTube, the Brooklyn Nets, to I think a lot of their fan base's excitement, have finally committed with the Mikal Bridges trade to a long-term, all-in rebuild process. And I think we can all agree it's about time they actually do that because, I've said for a couple years now, that's something they needed to, enter into. You trade away your best player, get a lot of assets back for him. You finally have your own draft pick in 2025. I'm sure as Nets fans, you guys are probably excited that the team is finally moving in a direction you can get behind with this long-term rebuild. And while you are still very far away from competing for a title, let's not get that twisted. For one, you're finally doing something about it. And for number two, you actually do still have young pieces you can build around, like Nic Claxton, like maybe Cam Thomas, like some other young intriguing prospects and project pieces like Noah Clowney, like Dariq Whitehead and Sharpe. These are players you hopefully will see on the floor quite a bit next season, and Summer League MVP Jalen Wilson. There's plenty to be excited about if you're a Brooklyn Nets fan, and in this video that's going to be a deep dive on the entire Brooklyn Nets offseason. So we're going to be going through every single move they've made this offseason. That includes draft, free agency, trades, re-signings, additions, and departures, as well as who you can expect to see on the floor for the Nets. We're going to go through a massive roster inventory deep dive after the offseason portion of the video, where I go through player by player and, what to expect out of them next season. Everybody worth noting on the roster, folks. Let's get right into the Brooklyn Nets NBA deep dive for the upcoming 2024-25 season. I am so excited to talk about this. Let's go. So as I mentioned, this was a pivotal offseason for the Nets. They had to really decide, what direction are we taking this franchise into? Are we going to be content with mediocrity and hoping a guy like Mikal Bridges or Keon Johnson develops into a star player that we can build around, as our top guy? Or are we going to blow this thing up and really look to shake up this team and, build for hopefully a successful rebuild long term where you maybe get some high draft picks. You have 4 of them in the first round next season, which is absolutely wild. And you did make some impactful offseason moves. We usually start with the re-signings. We're actually going to have to start with this Mikal Bridges trade because obviously this is the highlight moment for your offseason, no matter, any way you want to discuss it. So, you do trade Mikal Bridges, and it is a big one, folks, a blockbuster trade, and he actually moves right down the street to Madison Square Garden from the Barclays Center. You send Mikal Bridges, Keita Bates-Diop, a 2026 second-round pick, and the draft rights to Juan Pablo Valle to the Knicks, and in turn, you receive, get ready, there's a big list here, folks, Bojan Bogdanovic, Shake Milton, Mamadi Diakite, I believe that's how you pronounce it. He actually, we'll get into that later. He actually isn't going to be on the Nets next season. And 4 unprotected first round picks from the New York Knicks, and that includes 2025, 2027, 2029, and 2031. An unprotected pick swap in 2028. Top 4 protected 2025 first round pick via the Bucks, and a second round pick in 2025. That is a lot of draft capital to be acquiring for a player you weren't necessarily going to build around as one of your main options in the future. An absolute W trade for both sides, really, but for the Nets in particular, this is how you kick off a rebuild, folks. You got to be thrilled with the return for Mikal Bridges, and so we had to start with that, right? And, so Nets fans, let me know down in the comment section how you feel about this trade. What are you thinking about the rebuild? Now we'll get into the re-signings, and you lock down your center of the future, and one of your franchise cornerstones, in my opinion. This guy is criminally underrated by seemingly the entire media, and that is Nic Claxton, who will return to the Brooklyn Nets on a multi-year deal worth up to $100 million. And this, again, this is how you start a rebuild, folks. You lock down the guys you want to build around, obviously that being Nic Claxton as the big of the future, one of the most versatile defenders in the entire league. This guy is a, DPOY candidate next season if he stays healthy, no question about it for me, okay? The, switchability that Nic Claxton possesses, he can go out and guard, ball handlers on the perimeter. He is an elite rim protector, in my opinion. Even though he has a slighter frame for a big center that you would hope to be your rim protector, it doesn't seem to matter for him as he is able to match up against almost any center in the league pretty favorably, I'd say. So this is, again, probably the best player on this team right now next season, and a guy that you can trust to build with moving forward as that cornerstone center of the future. Love the re-signing for the Nic Claxton situation. Absolute W for the Nets. W's in the comments, folks. Again, we'll get into every player later in the roster deep dive, but you also re-sign Keon Johnson, who is a player that I think has a lot of offensive bag upside upside to him. Like, he has an absolute bag from the perimeter. He is a, long guard or wing, whatever you want to call him. He is a guy that I think can take you off the dribble, can score in multiple ways. I like the re-signing for an offensive upside player in Keon Johnson, who is a very young talent. Definitely a guy I think is intriguing for this roster moving forward as a bag type scorer. I like the move. And then Trendon Watford returns on a new deal. Another young talented piece for the Brooklyn Nets. Trendon Watford, previously with the Trailblazers, last season with the Nets. He re-signs. This is a player that I actually like quite a bit. I think he has a lot of playmaking capabilities as a big forward, like almost like a point forward, you could say, in a way. But he also does a lot of things well. I think he is a solid shooter. I think he has a little bit of scoring upside as well. He uses his body in a lot of different ways that are positive offensively. They list him as a 6'8" power forward, but again, this is a positionless kind of player offensively. I think he makes a ton of sense to bring back. One of the players that I think is going to get some of the most minutes on this team next season. They can trust to be out there on the floor and make good things happen offensively. Very versatile offensive player. Again, those playmaking capabilities are going to come in clutch. I think, you kind of turn him loose next season to see exactly how high the ceiling is on those playmaking abilities as a kind of point forward. Just overall, just a good utility piece. I really like the re-signing there. That's one of the better ones, probably one of the better players on your team next season. So those are the re-signings. 3 W's for me. And, you again, lock down one of your franchise cornerstones. For the additions category, you made a few of them. Actually, 2 of them involved in the trade via the Mikal Bridges trade with the Knicks. Bojan Bogdanovic, this is a player that obviously is a skilled offensive talent, great perimeter shooter, super efficient offensive guy. I think you could see him moved by the deadline. We'll get into that later about what you can expect from this team's deadline. But again, I just think, this is a player that maybe you could dangle in, around the trade deadline for, some contending teams and say, hey, you want Bojan Bogdanovic? How about a couple second round picks? We'll make that happen for you. You just got to, trade the guys you're not planning to build with moving forward for some, future assets. And, I think second round picks could be a good deal. We'll have to see what happens with Bojan, but, he is a guy that, is familiar with the Nets, having played there for a long time. Just a piece to throw into the trade that, matches the salary. And again, I think, him being a potential deadline asset is big for them. You actually agree to a 1-year deal with Killian Hayes. And Killian Hayes, one of the top lottery picks for the Detroit Pistons in the past, has really struggled offensively throughout his career. But one thing is for sure about Killian Hayes, this guy is a versatile defender as a point guard. And I think, if you could really get a little bit better offensive efficiency out of him than, Detroit Pistons did, this is a player that I think, again, has a lot of versatility. He is a good sized point guard. The Nets have a lot of defenders on this team that are versatile. And you just add him to the mix as a potential upside guy. Again, during these rebuilds, you want to throw a bunch of talent on the floor, see what ends up sticking, see what kind of guys you like for your core moving forward. Not saying Killian Hayes is that or could be that, but I think just signing high upside guys that maybe the league has kind of turned against as far as teams not wanting them to be in the NBA. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I like the move there because if you think about how it worked out last season for a team like the Dallas Mavericks, a good comparison would be Dante Exum, right? And Dante Exum was a high draft pick just like Killian Hayes, who had struggles throughout his career at that point guard position, and last season ends up going to the Mavericks, revitalizing his career. He is a solid role player. I think you could see a similar type of situation, hopefully, if you're the Brooklyn Nets, that it works out that way. But again, these are moves that I think you take a high upside shot on for a high potential young player who has fallen out of favor with a lot of executives. Just see what he has. What can hurt about a 1-year deal in this regard? I like the move. Shake Milton, also involved in the Brooklyn Nets trade with Mikal Bridges, coming over from New York. Didn't have a role with New York, signed a free agent deal with the Minnesota Timberwolves last season. Didn't end up working out there. He is a former 76er. As a Sixers fan, I could say a lot of good things about Shake Milton. I'm sure Nets fans know all about him because we play you guys quite often. Shake Milton's a good offensive player. Flat out, he can. He's got a little bit of a unconventional bag to him as a guard who is just a flat out good scorer, decent playmaker, and I like his game a lot. He did a lot of great things with my Sixers. Unfortunately, hasn't found a role on a different team. Maybe he ends up doing that in Brooklyn. We'll have to see. But I like the player a lot. Again, I have kind of a bias towards him, but I think you guys will like him as well if he's able to find a consistent role. Maybe him and Killian Hayes have a kind of battle there for a backup point guard spot. We'll have to see. You also acquire Ziaire Williams, who is another guy that was drafted highly by a team recently, and that was the Memphis Grizzlies. You acquire him in a trade with the Memphis Grizzlies for Mamadi Diakite and the draft rights to Nemanja Dangubic. I hope I'm saying that correctly. You also acquire a Dallas Mavericks second round pick in the deal. Listen, we'd be kidding ourselves if we didn't think that Ziaire Williams was a talented upside player. Another guy that has fallen out of favor with their team, a young player that was highly drafted, who still has a lot to prove in the league. league. And I think, he is in a better position than some other guys to be able to do that because, for one, he has incredible size and defensive capabilities for a wing, right? He has a versatile defensive skill set, and I think that could keep him on the floor if anything. But another thing is like his three-point shot just hasn't been falling. And for a, defensive wing, I think that is obviously crucial for a, player like that staying on the floor. This is a big if, but, if he can knock down a consistent three ball from the corner at times, he is a offensive upside player in other ways as well. And again, this is a talented young player that I think if you're the Nets, you're just throwing a bunch of young talent on the floor and, taking high swings on these guys. You didn't really give up much to get him, for one. And since he was a high draft pick, he's actually a restricted free agent next season, which is good for you guys. So you hold the keys to his future, no matter what it looks like, with his play on the court. But I think, again, just a very good swing on a high potential player. And, this is what you got to do for a rebuild, and I keep saying this, but I really like the move. So those are the additions, a bunch of W's there as well. You could say that I'm, being super favorable to the Nets, and a lot of people for these deep dives criticize my, liking a lot of these moves. If you have a problem with what I said, please let me know, but how are these not W moves? You could say, oh, Killian Hayes bad, right? Ziaire Williams bad. That's just not how I look at things. And, that's pretty simplistic way to view ball, and I don't really do that on this channel. So I just, I think these are, some very solid moves here for a team with the Nets that are entering in a long-term rebuild. So those are the additions. And then the departures, you have two of them, and those are Keita Bates-Diop, Mikal Bridges, both involved in the Mikal Bridges trade, obviously. You also will have a couple other departures, in my opinion. There are two players from your team that haven't signed with other teams yet, but I would expect both of them to not re-sign with the Nets, just, given the situation going on with the rebuild. And those two players are Lonnie Walker IV and Dennis Smith Jr. I think those two players, no question, will sign elsewhere if they sign at all. Those are two pretty solid depth pieces for a team that maybe could be looking for some more guard depth, or, Lonnie Walker, obviously a good scorer. Those two players, I think, you can make a case are probably some of the best still on the market as far as free agents go. But yeah, I think those will be the in the departures column by the time the season starts, no question. So that is the offseason, very eventful. Obviously trading your best player away, but you get like basically 1,000 draft picks for him, and some players you could move moving forward, like Bojan Bogdanovic and potentially Shake Milton by the deadline. And the return for Mikal Bridges is immense. I think that's about as good as you could possibly hope for. So definitely great stuff to see out of a rebuilding team, taking a lot of shots at the board and seeing what sticks for the talent next season. You add a lot of young pieces that have a lot to prove in the NBA. Worst case scenario, it's a one-year deal with Killian Hayes. Worst case scenario, you don't build with Ziaire Williams moving forward. Best case scenario, you get two young talented pieces that the league basically has given up on and get them for dirt cheap basically. So great moves there, and those are all of the offseason moves. For the next segment of the video, we always go over the draft and then we move on to the roster deep dive. But unfortunately for the Nets, they actually didn't acquire any draft picks this season because they didn't have any. But again, I think I will fill up this space with a little bit of future Nets talk. Okay, so bear with me if you can. I'll keep it brief because this is the draft segment. But again, we will be replacing this with some future projections, what I think about this rebuild and stuff like that. So what you could see happening down the road. You could skip this part if you want. The roster deep dive will start. I'll put the thing right here. Basically for this segment, I want to talk about how the Nets rebuild could end up going, because we're not going to be able to do this roster deep dive without talking about some of these players potentially being traded. We already know who those players are. We'll get into that in a second, but you do have a lot of high upside role players on this team, guys that are veterans that could help teams now that obviously don't fit your timeline, who are just going to end up taking away playing time from young players. Those players include Cam Johnson, probably being the most valuable of the bunch, Dorian Finney-Smith, who's been rumored to a lot of trades with my 76ers. We could end up seeing a KJ Martin and a first round pick scenario where they trade that by the end of the deadline. They can't technically trade KJ Martin until January, I believe. So I would expect DFS to be moved by the deadline, no question. Cam Johnson, we'll have to see what the Nets really want to do with him. Is he a player you want to build with? Entering his late 20s now, and I think that could be a situation where you say, well, he is a young player with a lot of talent that we like that could fit into a lot of different cores. But by the time we really get this thing off and running, he'll be about 30 years old on a big contract. So we could see him moved as well for a big haul. It would be a big haul because Cam Johnson's a very talented and versatile two-way player that could help a contender immediately. The Ben Simmons situation, I don't think he'll be moved, especially with that contract, but I will say, he is probably one of the biggest expiring contracts, maybe the biggest this offseason. I would imagine, unless a miracle happens with his situation, we will be seeing him not return to the Nets next year. Hopefully he can turn it around for you guys. That would be be absolutely incredible and you could extend him. At his best, he is an all-star caliber player. If he plays like he has been, which is very scarcely and non-impactful most times, then we will 100% see him not re-signed and basically an expiring $40+ million contract, which will be huge for your free agent chances, which we obviously know that the Nets are capable of luring free agents in. Playing in New York is always a positive thing for attracting free agents, as we've seen with Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. So that expiring contract is massive if you don't get a miracle season out of Ben Simmons and a career turnaround season, which is sad to say as a Sixers fan, but probably most likely that it will not be a miracle turnaround season. There is a small chance it could be with all the talent he possesses. However, if you've been watching his career at all, paying attention even poorly, I think you would know that it is more unlikely. So it is unfortunate to see the road Ben Simmons has gone down. Clearly the talent has never been an issue. There are some things he has to work on, and it's not our job to speculate on what those are. So yeah, I really do pray and hope that he can make a full recovery with his career and stuff like that, because he is an awesome player to watch, and I'm sure Nets fans want that as well. But as far as the veterans, Dennis Schroder, another guy, I just think Bojan Bogdanovic, Dennis Schroder, Ben Simmons, Cam Johnson, and DFS, like, these are guys that will most likely not be on the team in 2 years. I would say all of them won't be, and I think you just got to get what you can for him. For Ben Simmons, it is the contract expiration that will free up a ton of salary cap for you. Bojan, same thing. I think he's on an expiring. I could be wrong about that. Please let me know, but it is a $20+ million deal. If not, you dangle him in the trade deadline. This is a player that you could get a couple second round picks for. Could help a contender, no question. You get something valuable back for him. Dennis Schroder, same thing. Very skilled, talented point guard that I think has a role on a competitor. Obviously not going to be the Nets this season. At the end of the day, he will just be taking up playing time for young players, but still a gifted player with a lot of upside for a competitive team. DFS, I would expect a Sixers trade. If not, definitely probably be somewhere else. There's a lot of forward depth on this team. You got to get those guys in there. You could probably get a first round pick for DFS, no question, from the right team. I think it will be the Sixers. Knock on wood. I really like him as a power forward. That's kind of what we need. So yeah, I just want to spend that segment talking about that kind of stuff, because we're going to be talking about these guys with the roster deep dive. So without further ado, we're going to get into the roster deep dive, but I felt that was important to add context to these situations, because we're going to be talking about these players, but these players might not be there by the end of the season. So this is my favorite part of the deep dive, when we get into the roster inventory, give my takes throughout the deep dive on a lot of these players. And without further ado, folks, let's get right into the Brooklyn Nets upcoming 2024-25 season roster deep dive. I will catch you guys in there. We're going to have to start with the, who I believe is the best player on this team, and that is Nic Claxton, the center of the Brooklyn Nets future. I talked about this before. I think Nic Claxton is a DPOY candidate, moving forward. I think he will make several all-NBA defense teams by the time his career is over. He is a double-double machine. He is a rim-protecting machine. He is a solid finisher at the rim, obvious lob threat, great athlete. He can switch out on the defensive end of the floor to, ball handlers, forwards. He can basically guard any position, pretty comfortably. He is a great weak side shot blocker. He is a great defender. I've seen him give Joel Embiid of my Sixers, plenty of issues in the past. I think he is about as good of a defensive center as you're going to find in the league, and I only think he gets better at that moving forward. Locking him down on this contract is going to be so big for this team. Such a great move. He's only 25 years old, and he's had a great career so far. This is a solid offensive rebounder as well. Not enough credit there. Let's be honest about the free throw percentage. It could be something you look to upgrade moving forward. I think he's probably obviously working on that. This guy's a worker, but you're not re-signing him to that big contract for a 20 point per game offensive center. He's not going to be a 20 and 10 guy, right? He is just a solid rim running offensive center who has a lot of offensive rebound capabilities. He is a great dunker, great transition finisher offensively. I think he's a solid passer as well for that big man spot. I think he's a smart player who's developed into a just a well-rounded solid non-liability offensive player at that center position. Defensively, he has some of the best skill set versatility in the entire league, as we mentioned. So Nic Claxton is the guy you build around. He is your future center. I don't think necessarily he's ever going to be like a all NBA player or maybe even an all-star, but he certainly will be in DPOY contention. He will be getting votes there moving forward. He will be all NBA defensive. I would expect at least 3 times throughout his career. This is a guy you can trust at center to lead this team moving forward. And I think he'll probably probably production-wise, he has the best season of his career next year, being the best player on this team. So with more opportunities to showcase different things, maybe he surprises us offensively and has a little bit of a different showing than we would expect. So I think, Nic Claxton, again, this is clearly the, most likely player that you keep on this roster for the next 5 to 10 years. Obviously, he is the guy you build around. Cam Thomas, we haven't given much, credit to him for his development as a scorer. Now, I watched Cam Thomas even in his rookie year on this Big Three era team. He's just an absolutely lethal offensive bag player. Obviously, there are going to be people that say, well, he's inefficient, he's a small guard, he can't really be depended on to be a number one scorer moving forward. While some of that might be true, I don't think that's necessarily the thing you want to define his career as, okay? I think personally, Cam Thomas could be a third option, second option on a playoff team as a scorer. Last season was the first year we really saw him get that big time role as a scorer on this team. He's only 22 years old. You're just gonna have to give some of this time, but a guy who averages 22 points a game on 44% from the field as a small guard is nothing to sneeze at. I mean, if he takes a leap with playmaking, this is one of the most talented offensive guards in the league. If he can find some way to be a, I don't know necessarily he's ever going to be a lead playmaker, but just a better playmaker. If we could see those assist numbers jump from around 3 a game to around 5 or 6 a game on similar turnover numbers, like he averaged 3 assists per game last season with 2 turnovers, that's not great. But at the end of the day, this is a 2 guard, so we'll just have to see what his playmaking ceiling is. I think that's something they're probably going to emphasize with him next year. If that takes a big jump, the scoring will complement the playmaking and vice versa. But again, the efficiency is still pretty good for a small guard. 86% from the line on 5 attempts per game. That's definitely an encouraging sign. He's able to get to the line pretty consistently on good free throw shooting, and then also 6 attempts on threes per game last season at 36%. That is very, very solid for one of your top scorers. I think he'll probably lead the team again in points next season. The emphasis will have to be on the playmaking. I think that is his next hurdle to, jump through as a development piece. If you could see that playmaking take a big leap, this is an all-star caliber player, no question about it, in a couple years. We talked about how Keon Johnson would end up being the player that gets the biggest haul as far as some of these veterans. It's hard to believe he's 28 because, it feels like he's still kind of a young player, but this is one of the best complementary wings in the league, okay? For one, he's a very solid defender, good two-way player. Second, he's one of the best shooters in the league. He is a dynamic type of wing shooter, okay? He has great size at 6'8". He can get those shots off at a high volume and knock them down at a high efficiency. But, the big thing to note here is the shooting from that, height, because there's not going to be a lot of times where defenders can get those closeouts fast enough to be able to get anywhere near his release. So you have to be able to stay on his hip at all times. That makes an offense very dynamic, especially one that's trying to contend. And so I think you see Cam Johnson potentially being on the move for a big time draft pick haul, or a, another young player that's swapped out for him. A lot of teams will be interested in this type of off-ball scorer and shooter, and he plays good defense. There's so much to like about his game. If you choose to build with him moving forward, that's an option as well. I mean, you already have him on a long-term contract. Health has been a factor for his career, no question about it. Last season ended up playing 58 games. The season before that, he had some injury issues. He has not played over 66 games in his career, but if he comes out healthy and, as strong as he is production-wise next season, I'm telling you, the haul is going to be massive if you choose to trade him. If you choose to keep him around, another great option there. He can be a very, very good complementary piece, as we've seen with him, going all the way to the finals on that Suns team as a very young player, as one of the top key role players on that team. So anybody that's looking for another piece to add to their, starting lineup that is trying to contend next season, we talk about team with assets, right? Like teams like the OKC Thunder, teams like the Houston Rockets. These could be key trade negotiations between teams like this because they have a lot of young players to trade. They have a lot of draft picks to bargain with. So, this could be a couple situations you see there where they're looking to acquire a guy like Cam Johnson. Who knows? Maybe you get a big haul for him, or maybe you keep him around. At the end of the day, you got a good situation there with Cam Johnson on a long-term deal. One of the best complementary pieces in the league at that wing position. Dorian Finney-Smith, another great, complementary role player. I think he's a great defender. He's a big body type of defender, physical, tough rebounder, defender type of guy from that power forward position. Good floor spacer, good enough shooter. I would bet odds on Dorian Finney-Smith. I think there's about a 90% chance he's traded by the deadline, and I think you get, pretty solid return for him. He's 31 years old. He's on a $15 million contract. People are going to be overpaying for him because of, the situation where if the Nets just play a little bit of hardball, they could get a solid first round pick out of this from a team like my Sixers for Dorian Finney-Smith. I think that is in play play 100%. Ben Simmons, I don't want to get into this too much. We already talked about it in the draft segment that we replaced it with, but at the end of the day, this was a generational talent, okay? And it's unfortunate the direction his career has gone in. Again, we're not here to speculate on, what those things are that has, turned his career this way, but the back injury is certainly, an issue. The injuries are an issue. The commitment to winning, could be looked at as an issue. I just hope he plays basketball next season at a consistent level. I hope he plays 50, 60 games next year. At the end of the day, even at his worst, he is a versatile defender. This is a DPOY type of defender at his best. At his worst, he's a guy that can guard multiple positions and be like a point forward. The shooting, likely at this point is never going to develop, but he is a generational type of playmaker. I think we can all agree on that. That just innate ability to make plays that not a lot of other players can historically at his size. I mean, it's top 0.0001% of, that type of playmaking for his size historically. Rebounding, he's always going to be good at. Freak athlete, obviously. I just hope he plays consistent ball next season. If not, and you don't choose to re-sign him, which, definitely is a possibility if the miracle season doesn't occur, at the end of the day, you have a $40+ million contract expiration, which you can use in a plethora of ways in free agency or, save it for moving forward. So there are players on this team that will need to be extended, like Cam Thomas. So, at the end of the day, it's unfortunate how his career has gone with the Nets thus far, but, there is an opportunity next season. We'll just have to see how it develops. I think either way it goes, you have a good outcome. If it's a miracle season, you have a breakout Ben Simmons, who you didn't expect. If it is not a miracle season and, kind of goes the same way it was going, you get $40 million in cap room. So, either way, I think it's kind of a good deal at this point for the Nets. Bojan Bogdanovic, again, I think he'll be traded by the deadline, no question about it. Great, talented, efficient player offensively. Dennis Schroder, very underrated playmaker and offensive talent. He gets into the lane as quick as, anybody in the league. He's very, very solid at, dribble drive penetration, kicking out, drive and kick. He is exceptional at that. He is a great playmaker. He is also a long defender from the guard position. He is a decent enough shooter and scorer to be able to remain on the floor. I think this, unfortunately, if you're a Nets fan and you're looking for, young guys to step up and get more minutes, Dennis Schroder is one of those guys that, could be taking away minutes from some of those players. So kind of unfortunate there if you're looking to see some young talent. But, another guy that could be on the move, I want to get these veterans out of the way first because there's so much young talent to get to. But yeah, Dennis Schroder, talented player either way. He's on a multi-year deal still. Good chance he's traded by the deadline. I would definitely say that comfortably. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the veterans I want to talk about. We talked about Shake Milton and how he, could be fighting for that backup point guard type of role. It'd be interesting to see how much he plays next season. I would love to see Shake Milton on the floor again consistently for a team to showcase his offensive ability. He is a, exceptional, again, unconventional type of six-man, microwave scorer. I think that's when he's at his best. I love Shake Milton. He's a fun player to watch. Hopefully he gets an opportunity next season. But other than that, let's get into these young players, man, because there's so many guys that are under the radar for the Brooklyn Nets that I want to talk about, including Noah Clowney, who was a first-round pick for you guys last year, who I like a lot. And this is one of the multitude of big men that you have that are young and up and coming, that have a ton of potential for this team. And let's talk about it. Noah Clowney, last year first-round pick. He is a very, very good rebounder. He is a 6'9" player who is long. He really can either play the 4 or the 5. I would expect him to get a lot of power forward minutes next season. He's a great floor spacer. He has a very repeatable jump shot mechanic-wise. His mechanics are good. The percentage was good as a rookie last season. Unfortunately, only ended up playing a little over 20 games because the opportunity just wasn't quite there for him. But I think, this is a floor spacing big that has some defensive upside. He's a little bit of a versatile defender. I think he is locked in and engaged on both ends of the floor. He plays with a lot of edge to him, and I like that out of a young player always, and for a big especially, because there is some rim protection upside. There is 100% some capabilities to weak side shot block and things like that. I think personally, this might be a hot take, I think Noah Clowney might have some of the highest potential for any young player on this team. Again, could be a hot take. I just like the player a ton. We saw a little bit last season. He was, a 5-man throughout this rotation. In some of his standout games, he mostly played the 5, but he also can play next to Nic Claxton, especially with that floor spacing ability. So that is a monster duo that I think has to be on the floor a lot next season. So playing alongside Nic Claxton, he's obviously the power forward and the 4, but again, the Nets are very versatile on both ends, so it's kind of a positionless thing. But his ability to play next to Claxton, I think, makes him more valuable at a 4 rather than a backup 5, because we're going to talk about another backup 5 in a second, who I like a lot, who's another young player. But again, Noah Clowney just has a ton of upside for me on both ends, and I think his rebounding is very good, and I just love his overall skill set as a player. Some of the highest potential on this team for me, no question. I think he gets a way bigger opportunity next season than he did last year. That's one of the pluses about, a long-term rebuild. You're throwing a lot of young guys out there, and I think Nic Claxton is going to benefit from that a ton. The other big man that you could play a lot of times at the backup five, who I think is probably the backup five of your future, which is awesome because you basically have your center position locked down for years to come. That is Sharpe, who showed a ton of progress in multiple areas last season as a young player. Sharpe, I think, is the future backup five for this team. I think that is an exciting thing for you guys. And Sharpe is an excellent rebounder. He's going to be potentially a double-double guy. If he played 30 minutes per game, which he, might not, probably won't, but he's a double-double guy in that case. He's an offensive rebounding machine. 100% the best offensive rebounder on this team. He is an absolute monster on those offensive boards. He is a very good finisher. That's one of the areas he improved in a lot last season, in my opinion. He's also a solid weak side shot blocker. I think he has some, versatile defensive upside there. But, Sharpe, with this trio, this young big trio of Nic Claxton, Sharpe, and Clowney, this is the brightest spot of this team, in my opinion. And we talked about how this team is very far away from competing. They have a lot of core building to do, and I think that comes a lot of it next year in the draft. It's supposed to be a very good draft class, by the way. But you look at this team, you say, well, other than Claxton, who is really going to be in this core moving forward, other than maybe Cam Thomas, and you say, well, this big man trio, okay, this is the brightest spot of this team for their future, no question. These are three guys you can build with potentially. And again, clearly for me, just looking at this roster from an outside perspective, the brightest spot of this core and future, no question for me. I just love the big man situation in Brooklyn, probably top of the league in terms of, upside big men trios. Or, if you look at a young roster, any of them in the league that are rebuilding, developing, this one has potential to be the best in my opinion. And it is already so good. And I think all of these players take a step up next season with an increased opportunity. Sharpe, no exception. We talked about Keon Johnson, another young player with a lot of upside as a bag type of scorer. He can, get it off the dribble. He can create a little bit for himself. I like his game. You re-sign him, have to see what, his role is. I think another just, self-creating scorer a little bit could be a lot of value off the bench for this team. And Trendon Watford, another big versatile player. This team is really stacking up on versatile big bodies that can do multiple things on both ends. Trendon Watford, could be a point forward type of guy that you look to build with moving forward. I love his game a lot. I'm not sure how much better he's really going to get in his career. This was his third season last year. He'll be going into his fourth year this year. I'm not sure Trendon Watford has like a crazy explosive ceiling, but I think the player that you have, if he just continues to make, incremental improvements on the things he's already good at, I mean, this is a very valuable utility piece of this core moving forward. And again, I keep repeating this, man. Trendon Watford, another guy that is only 23 years old. And, he's listed as a power forward, but he's more positionless than that. He's a big body and he uses it well. He's listed at 6'8", 240. I think that's pretty accurate. He has a nice soft touch offensively. He's a good shooter, good floor spacer. He can, basically rebound, pass, dribble, shoot. Like, he can do all those things. And I think there are some defensive, upside type of things that you could see from him. I just love that utility skill set. It is so important for any rebuilding or winning team to have a utility piece like that that can do all of those things consistently. I always talk about this in these deep dives, man. The teams that always win championships, they have all of those guys, right? They have the utility piece guy that can do a lot of different things on both ends. Last year for the Celtics, it was Dariq White and Jrue Holiday. Not saying Watford will ever be that great defensively, but you know what I mean? Like, Bruce Brown could be a good comp. With the Denver Nuggets, I know Bruce Brown is a very small, much smaller than Trendon Watford is, but he dribble, pass, shoot, defend. These are the types of guys that help you win championships. I could see Trendon Watford, being a part of this core as a role player moving forward. Excellent role player, and you re-sign him, which I like a lot. Dariq Whitehead was another player you drafted in the first round last season, and unfortunately only played 2 games last season with the Nets. Was in the G League for most of the season. Maybe he was a little bit less ready than you thought going into the season. Dariq Whitehead was a prospect I liked, just looking at his skill set. He's a really good shooter. Again, another guy with good mechanics that is very replicatable. That's what you look for in shooters. He is a, good size wing that has a lot of offensive upside to him. I think he, in the future at his best ceiling could be a decent off-ball role-playing scorer that you look to maybe, hopefully create a little bit at times and be a solid knockdown catch-and-shoot guy with a lot of defensive upside. I like his frame. He has an NBA body already, in my opinion. But I think, for the biggest thing for Dariq Whitehead is just throwing him out there next season and seeing what he has. That's what you have to do when you're rebuilding. They're clearly looking to win as least amount of games as possible, probably. Hopefully win the Cooper Flagg Sweepstakes. We'll have to see what that means for some of these young forwards if that does happen, but I'm sure you'd be okay with that if you're a Nets fan. Either way, there's a ton of prospects that are super high ceiling in next year's draft. It's a great draft class from what I understand. And so if you're in the top 5, top 6, top 7, like, you have a really good shot at getting a high ceiling future player for you guys. But I think, again, Dariq Whitehead, no more G League for this guy. If you're the Nets, you got to throw him out there and see what he has. Even if you don't think he's ready, throw him out there and see what he can do. There's got to be something you can work with there. He's clearly a young and talented player. No more G League for this guy. We got to see what he has. I like Dariq Whitehead's upside moving forward. We got to talk about Jalen Wilson, okay? Summer League MVP, probably the, one of the highlights of this offseason for the Nets. Obviously that is so encouraging to see from a young forward. First of all, with Jalen Wilson, despite the Summer League MVP, this is a versatile two-way player. Again, another guy that's 6'6 plus that can do a lot of things on both ends, but we have to talk about the three-point shooting. It is absolutely lethal, folks, okay? Jalen Wilson shot 55% from three on high volume in the Summer League, contributing to his Summer League MVP award. He has shot creating upside. He has a lethal sniping, three-point shooting, difficult threes too, on the move, off the dribble. It's not just catch and shoots, folks. Defensive upside again, could be a versatile player there, dominant shooting. This is a guy, Jalen Wilson, he absolutely has to see minutes and consistent ones next season, whether it's off the bench or in the starting lineup. I don't care. This is the type of player you have to see what he has, okay? Guys like him, Dariq Whitehead, I know there's a ton of forwards that are going to be looking for minutes, more opportunity next season. We already talked about like 5 of them, but if I'm a Nets fan and I'm not seeing great things out of the gate from Ben Simmons, I say, you know what? Let's get Watford out there. Let's get Whitehead out there. Let's get Jalen Wilson out there and see what out of all of these guys, Noah Clowney, out of all of these guys, who do we like to take into this, future core of this team, if any of them. So again, if you don't see a strong showing early on from Ben Simmons, I think a lot of these guys, including Jalen Wilson, needs to be a priority to get on the floor and see what they can do, because this is how you rebuild a team. This is how you pick out a core. Some of these guys will separate themselves from the other ones, man. This is what separates the men from the boys. You give all these guys an opportunity, see which one wins and who you think, maybe in the future you could add to this core. And I think Jalen Wilson has to be a part of that strategy for the Nets. That's what I hope to see out of every rebuilding team. And I think the Nets are going to have to do that next season if they're serious about rebuilding. You got to be patient with some of these guys too. It can't just be like, oh, he didn't have a good game, you're out of the rotation. Like, it cannot be that type of thing. They have to give these guys fair opportunities and, really maximize and see their opportunities to see exactly what type of player they're going to be. So yeah, Killian Hayes, another guy, I think we talked about a little bit, he's obviously a player that has a ton of defensive upside. He's going to be a great defender for this team day one. I think him and Shake Milton will likely fight for that backup point guard minutes. Cam Thomas, Dennis Schroder, these are the starting guards for sure for me. But, on the bench, this team doesn't have a ton of guard depth. So we'll have to see between those two guys which one, ends up earning those minutes. If I had to guess, if you miss out on Cooper Flagg next season, who you're going to take, it's probably going to be a guard high in that draft, because while you do have an incredible amount of versatile forwards that could be, high upside guys, we've already talked about them, you do not have as many guards in that role, okay? So Killian Hayes, Shake Milton, out of these two guys, we'll have to see who, takes and makes the most out of this opportunity and who you like to, re-sign moving forward. You already signed Shake Milton to a multi-year deal, I believe, after the trade. So, but Killian Hayes, I think, has a way higher ceiling than Shake Milton, but I just think Shake Milton's probably the more reliable player right now. It'll be interesting. I think those are, two question marks for this team. But Killian Hayes has to shoot the ball more efficiently from all levels. No question about it if he's going to have any role in this league. And hopefully we can see that. He is a solid playmaker, in my opinion, and a great defender. The defense has never been the issue. But, so that's kind of it for the roster. I think we really covered most of the players I wanted to cover. Let me know down in the comment section if I'm missing anybody. But, a lot of up in the air stuff about this roster, including playing time, including opportunities, including trades, right? Like, we could see half of those guys that I mentioned first get traded by the deadline. The other half, probably won't be re-signed. These are veteran guys that don't fit the timeline mostly. And while I do think guys like, Dennis Schroder and Dorian Finney-Smith and Bojan Bogdanovic are valuable pieces to, help these young guys develop. These are good leadership players. I just think it's not the smartest thing to be throwing them out there 30 plus minutes a game when you have all this young talent that needs to prove prove themselves, who you can maybe learn a lot about, moving forward. And learning is the biggest thing you want to do this season. This is not about winning a certain number of games. This is about, first of all, it's about losing a lot of games so you could get a high draft pick, and get high in that lottery, finally having your own pick this season. And then, it's also about, as I said, being patient and learning from this, all these opportunities you're going to give this young players. Who's going to be on the big boy roster in a couple years, when we actually figure this thing out and put all the pieces together, who's going to be a part of that? This is something you have to watch for next season. So if I'm a Brooklyn Nets fan, I'm looking at all of these young players and seeing, what's their potential, what's their projection, are they going to get better? And if they are, like, what does that look like? How do they fit with some of the guys we already know, like Nic Claxton, Cam Thomas potentially? Like, how do we see them fitting with those two guys? And then also, like, is this a player do I think on a, in a perfect scenario could be, someone I build around? So a lot of young talent, no question about it. These guys might be some of them under the radar, but that doesn't change how talented they are. I think you have a lot of things to look forward to, Nets fans. Again, I always say this about rebuilding teams in these deep dives, okay? I have a very similar experience going through a complete tank job out of my 76ers during the process era. Nets fans, you'll remember that very well, again, playing us so much. What's important, I think, for the rebuilds, as a fan, is just to embrace them. Don't expect a ton of things next season. Only expect to learn about this core and learn about who you want to take with it. Through this process, for lack of a better term, no pun intended, you are going to learn a lot of things. You're going to see a lot of things that are pretty, uncomfortable to see, right? Like some of the guys you thought could be part of the core might not end up being that. You also could see a lot of guys end up being that you didn't. There's gonna be a lot of surprises is what I'm trying to say, but don't rush the team to make, all these different moves. That's what the Sixers did. They ended up rushing the process and it actually ended up failing because of that. You have to be very patient. This is going to take multiple years now. We're not talking about a 2-year kind of thing. This is a few years of losing, like big time too, I think, for this team. They're very far away, so they have to find that number one guy. I don't think it's on the roster yet, and I think it's going to take a couple swings high in the draft to be able to find that player, right? The savior of this franchise, right? But I think you do have some very solid pieces, as I mentioned, to be able to build around that guy, whoever it is in the future. Knock on wood for Cooper Flagg, capture the flag, right? If we're Nets fans here, that's probably who you want. But again, we'll have to see. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. As a Nets fan, please let me know down in the comment section if I got anything wrong. That's pretty much it for the video. I will get some of this stuff wrong, no question. You guys will have to correct me. I'm not a Nets fan. I don't watch every Nets game, but I try to watch a lot last season. I tried to do some research for this video, but again, there's just going to be things about these players in this team that maybe I don't, or maybe I mischaracterized. I did my best on the research, but who is your favorite player of this core, like, moving forward? Let me know down in the comment section, other than Nic Claxton. Like, he's the obvious choice, but like, between like Dariq Sharpe and Noah Clowney, Trendon Watford, Jalen Wilson, like, who is your favorite player of this core, hope to see take that big leap? For me, I think my two guys are like Noah Clowney and Dariq Sharpe, as well as Trendon Watford. Like, those are the three guys I'm most excited about seeing next year. Those are fun players and they got a lot of upside, very versatile. And again, I think the big man trio is absolutely dominant. They're going to be so good next season. That's the bright spot of this team. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Nets fans, let me know. Leave a like on the video if you guys did enjoy it. It really means a lot to me. We're on the road to 14,000 subscribers. So if you guys could subscribe, it would really, again, it would make my day. We're trying to get there as fast as possible. If you are curious to see any other deep dives, we've already covered most of the teams. We're going to be covering a new team every day or so until we cover all of them, right? I think this will be like our 22nd, 23rd, 24th team that we cover. So, if you're interested in any other teams, we're doing videos just like this for every team. We probably already covered the team you're interested in or, are about to. So make sure you guys stay tuned. After the deep dive series is over, it will be business as usual, folks. We're going to be covering all types of NBA news, everyday uploads on this channel, whatever it is, whether it's, just fun stuff every day, all things NBA every day on the channel. So, after the deep dives, don't be discouraged. Like, we're going to have so much more fun stuff planned. I promise you, I already do have fun stuff planned, including streaming on Twitch. We're going to be doing that very soon. So probably next week, I will be doing Twitch streams starting up pretty regularly. Okay. We're going to be doing 2K stuff. We'll do like, Q&As, like you guys can ask me my takes in the stream. I think it's a more fun way to engage with you guys other than just the comments, but I do try to reply to as many comments as I can. I love talking to you guys down there, but Twitch streams are going to be fun, man. That's going to be exciting for me. So make sure you guys do follow my Twitch channel. Link will be in the description. It's just twitch.tv/dhave if you guys want to just type it in, but make sure you guys stay tuned with this channel, the Twitch channel. Follow my Twitter. I'm pretty active over there. Anytime you want to message me on Twitter, whatever it is, my DMs are open as long as you follow me. So I promise I'll see it, so hopefully you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. Hope you enjoyed this deep dive. Nets fans, let me know. Like, subscribe, follow all the stuff. I already, that's my shameless plug. Other than that, I will see you guys tomorrow in another deep dive. I guess we'll just have to see what team it is. I already know, but you guys don't. That's the perk of being me. I already know what I'm going to do. You guys will just have to wait and see. Make sure you guys have post notifications on. I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day today. I will see you guys tomorrow. And this is your boy D-Habe, and as always, peace.